We go, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another hour of some good nature. Uh, You know, we've had this view before during our meetings together, and I haven't used it for a while, mostly because of what happened last year with that uh, branch that dropped down. Actually, it was more than just a branch; it was a limb. It was good size. I tell you, an arborist could not have dropped it better. It came right down between my house, my good neighbor's house, and I guess there's a little dent on the top of their chimney cap, but didn't poke a hole in anything. Didn't require an insurance claim. It did get me even more concerned. You can probably tell, maybe you can tell by looking if we tilt up here. This is a silver maple, also known as the insurance man's tree. And if you're local, you probably know why my stress level has been increased these last couple of nights with the storms we've been having. So this tree, I was going to take it out this past winter. I had talked to the tree guys. We agreed that we would find a time when the ground was frozen, so they could bring some equipment back here. Well, guess what? We didn't have the kind of winter where our ground froze for very long. So kept pushing it off. And then the next thing you know, it was spring, and spring was kind of busy. And now it's summer, which is truly the worst time to be taking a tree down. There's still birds that are nesting, sometimes squirrels. Like several squirrels around here are on their second nest of young. Pretty sure though, there's nothing living in this tree. There was one, it's kind of like a feeding platform of uh, leaves that have been gathered up there. Sometimes squirrels will put these leaves together, but they don't really live inside of them. Anyway, fingers crossed, after two reschedules, the tree will be coming tomorrow morning. So I thought it was a fitting tribute to this big old silver maple that's been here probably since the house was built, which was in the mid 1970s. That this particular background will be no more after tomorrow. Well, actually, the next day they said it's going to be a 2-day job. So that explains that. Get a couple of show and tells here before we launch into the week in pictures, and one of them actually has to do with you know I could talk at length about these things. These are freshwater mussel shells from our very own Fox River. Now, these I have put a urethane on to seal there's the calcified shell, and then there's what generally is a brownish covering over it. Well, that starts to flake off over time. So I was experimenting with different sealants, and this one yellowed the uh, shells ever so slightly, but you can still on the inside see the beautiful uh, mother of pearl, as it's sometimes called, interior. And why these shells were attractive 100 years ago for making buttons. I was reminded of these yet again today. I was doing a program where we were talking, this was part of our senior outreach to a memory cafe group up a little bit north of here. We were talking about buttons and the importance of the button industry here in the Midwest. Well, this whole thing started and actually nearly wiped out our mussels because of the billions that were harvested from all of our local streams. And well, the fellow who started this was a button maker from Germany. His name was Johann Boeppel. And he brought his button making technology here to the United States after Europe went into an economic recession. That actually prompted a big wave of immigration back in the 1870s. Well, when he got here, he had brought with him this little box that had some pearl buttons in it. And his father told him that the material for these buttons could be found in a river 200 miles west of Chicago. So Johann set out, and I don't know if he took a wrong turn or got some wrong information. He did go west, but it was actually more of a southwesterly direction, and he ended up not in what would be his ultimate destination of the Mississippi River, but the Sangamon River. Now, if you tune in every week, or even if you don't, I'll fill you in. The Sangamon River is a river that goes meanders its way all around central Illinois. I was lucky enough to be down in that area a few weeks ago with some friends. We actually walked along the Sangamon River, and we found some mussel shells. So imagine, late 1870s, Johann Boeppel, he's new to this country. He's eager to ply his trade of making buttons, which, by the way, when he was in Europe, he was using materials like bone, horns, antlers, those sorts of things. When he got here, that's what those items weren't in a plentiful supply, and that's why he was after these mussels. So he gets down to the Sangamon River and he does find some shells, but this is what the Sangamon River shells look like. This, and I don't have an exact idea on this. I think it's there's several freshwater mussel species that have these really, like you can see, it's almost translucent. This is a paper thin shell. There are actually some called paper shells. This might be a fragile paper shell. It might be a paper pond shell. I'm not exactly sure, and I didn't do the time I should have with the mussel field guide. The takeaway is, though, is Johann was crushed when he got down to the river, what he thought was where, it was going to be loaded with these kind of shells, and he found these, which of course are not suitable. In fact, you can see this one has some cracks in it, even though I tried to be careful when I brought it home. It's got cracks, it's got chips. It was intact. It was intact when we found it. Not all mussels are suitable for making buttons. When he got to the Mississippi, he found, look at these shells. And there are some mussels that can live 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. If people didn't come along and do something, they might last 100 years in the water. This shell is, it's solid, it's heavy, it's gonna make could have made some wonderful buttons had it been around back in the 1800s. Just to put a bow on this little story, the buttons were cut out of shells like this. Johann had drills that would produce discs that were then refined. Holes were punched in them. A lot of buttons got pretty fancy back then with different carvings around the edges. It fueled a whole industry that rose rapidly and then fell rapidly as well, because we almost ran out of mussels. There was a lot of indiscriminate collecting back then. People that were dragging river bottoms looking for mussels were particularly careful, and they might even come up with some of these thin-shelled species, and didn't matter if it was thick or thin. They all went into a big boiler where the meat was removed, and then the shells were sent to the button factory, and they ended up like this. Anyway, I just thought, since we'd just been down to the Sangamon, I didn't realize, and I don't know what part of the Sangamon Johann Boeppel was looking at shells in, but suffice it to say, not all shells are created equal. All right, other show and tells. Wild weather, been crazy, hasn't it? Lots of wind, lots of limbs down. I couldn't get over. I was going to a program yesterday in Geneva, and I had to pick. In fact, I ended up turning around on a couple of side streets south of the house here because there were just too many trees down. Crazy winds. that came through both Sunday night and last night. Although last night, at least in this particular area, they weren't quite as strong. I know farther south there were tornadoes. There was some tornado. There was a tornado in Oswego even. But when I was out yesterday morning, just kind of surveying what had happened here, this tree made it through amazingly enough, but a lot of other silver maples did not. I was looking on the ground. I didn't see any baby squirrels that were blown on us. I didn't see baby birds. Susie, I know you said your neighbor had found one. I was just kind of doing a little reconnaissance. What I did find was this, and I'm a little puzzled because I didn't know we had a sweet gum tree in the neighborhood. This is the fruit of a sweet gum. It's a tree that mostly is south of here. It's south of here as in like downstate, not south of here as in Geneva. But they're planted ornamentally. Some people have them in their yards. We have a few in our parks. Well, I think this was one of last year's fruits. And if I turn it, gosh, can you see? There's a storm casualty on this sweet gumberry. That is a green lacewing insect. Unfortunately, the closer I get with this, the less the camera wants to focus on it. Maybe you can get the gist. No, that makes it worse. Green lacewings, we see them this time of year. They come to our porch lights in their larval phase. They are predators. I believe they might feed on other insects even as adults, even though they look quite delicate. But I think maybe this one was clinging to this fruit and just got beat up by those incredible amounts of rain that we had. And it's now a memento. It'll probably be on my kitchen counter for a while as a reminder of that crazy weather we had. And finally, again, now if you are longtime good-natured listeners, you're going to be familiar with this. I know we have a few new folks tonight, so I wanted to first of all welcome you, and then second of all let you know there's a few recurring themes that we have when we get together, and one of them is going to hold it up here. Butternuts. So the butternut is a tree, also known as the white walnut. And I kid you not, this tree is, I don't know if it's taunting me, haunting me, stalking me. This past week, I found not one, but two butternuts, just about a block and a half from the house. Just walking, I walk down the sidewalk every day. If I'm not going to work, I'm walking the dogs. I don't know where these things were. But it's not like they got uncovered by the rains. This one, I think this was last week, and this one was Saturday, so before we had the real severe storms. White walnuts are very unusual in this area because their susceptibility to a canker disease that usually kills the tree before they reach the age of 20. And here we have not just one, but two in the same week. I find these nuts every few months. I'll find one. I found one in May, about a block or so from where I found these. Last year, I had found an intact one. I planted it. It sprouted. It grew nicely in a pot. It was about this big when I transplanted it into the yard, never thinking, because it's a walnut. It's Euglins is the genus name. I didn't think animals ate walnut because of the strong smell and the strong, I'm presuming, flavor, but a rabbit mowed that tree down, that little seedling down, and try as I might, I could not get it to resprout. Now this one, let's see, this nut was chewed open and it's empty. This nut, I can still feel the nut meat inside. So I'm going to try planting this one too, and we're going to see what happens. Maybe second time is the charm. I don't know. We'll see. But with that note, folks, let's start our pictures for this evening. I'll give you a little bit more info on these butternuts and where they're found. Let's go here to our first slide. So here was the first nut that I found. It's right next to the sidewalk. Could not believe it. And zoomed in, sure enough, butternuts. So walnuts, you might be familiar with the black walnut. That is by far the most common member of that genus that we have here in King County. A black walnut, by comparison, the nut is rounder, it's smaller, it's darker, and it does have a craggy, wrinkled looking outside to the nut, but the inside, this nut is much more so. This one has always kind of reminded me of like a peach pit. Now, if you do find a black walnut with its green husk still on, which there a lot of trees have dropped some, especially with the storms, there's a lot of walnuts, green walnuts on the ground. It's almost round. Sometimes they'll get a little bit oblong, or they'll have a little bump on one end. They like a lemon or a lime, with a bump on the end. These the white walnut in its husk, it is distinctly oblong in shape. It's sticky and it's a little fuzzy too. So it looks very different than the black walnut. This was round 2. This was last Saturday. I stopped and I stared, I zoomed in, and then I picked it up, and I cannot find where this tree is. I have looked high and low. It has to be somewhere in somebody's backyard. I even went, Bonnie, you and I, we went out last fall with binoculars even, and could not find this tree. For about the last 2 years, and this is, by the way, this is something I've been seeing these for probably at least 15 years. And I thought I had figured out which tree it was. It was in someone's front yard behind a hedge. But then that tree got cut down, and I still continued to find butternuts. So I don't know if that was a walnut tree. I was never able to find the fruit on that tree before it went away. Well, anyway, about I don't know, 2 years ago or so, I started making this map down here with the red X and that's this is ground zero as far as my base of operating. It's where I live. And these different colors of X's are where I have found these butternuts. We've got some red X's. The farthest away has been over here on 8th Street. I found a lot up here at the Bakerfield Park. I found a couple here on 6th Street. There were 2 in front of a sycamore. There was one where I found these most recent 2 as well. This purple one, and each color corresponds to a different map update. So let's just say the quest continues. Next up, so when I was walking around the neighborhood the other day, I was actually on my way. System resources. Can you see what's going on here? These are wasps, but they're not just any wasps. They are mud daubers. This was at a friend's house that I was actually walking to when I found that second and intact white walnut or butternut. They have a rain garden in their backyard. And again, this was before the big storms, but it was after some of the rains that we had this past week. Well, these are mud daubers, and what mud daubers do is they gather mud and they daub it, or they put it usually on a vertical surface. A lot of times around here, it's a house or some kind of building. But and then they will they'll start to construct their nest, and then they will I can pause it here. They'll take these little bits of mud, and that they'll build their nest. They will create some sort of tube or chamber in the nest. Different species have different shaped nests. Once they've created that chamber, then they provision it with a spider. A lot of wasps will do this. They feed their larvae live young, which they collect by stinging and paralyzing. The venom causes the prey to not be able to move, but it doesn't kill it. If it killed it, the little larvae would be eating on food that was decomposing, and that wouldn't be good. So here are these hapless prey, and for mud daubers, it is, I think, almost exclusively spiders. They will sting the spider, haul it back to the nest chamber, lay an egg on it, seal it with more mud, and off the mom goes to create her business. And then the larvae develop inside that chamber. They punch their way out once they have developed into wasps, and the cycle starts over again. But if we were watching these wasps, and while they're very, very busy there in the mud, we didn't really see much in the way of mud being picked up. I've seen sometimes they'll have mud in their mandibles. Now, maybe they're just tiny little particles here, or maybe they're just getting a drink. But one of many, many examples of wasp activity. These, by the way, these are all solitary wasps. They do not create a colony. They will have several chambers in each nest, and each chamber has a larvae in it. But together, that doesn't really mean a colony. There's no social organization to it. It just means there's a family with a bunch of babies. For that reason, these wasps are not likely to sting. If I grabbed one and put it in my hand, I might get stung. But they don't have that drive to protect the greater investment in life in the colony that our more social wasps do, like our bald-faced hornets and our paper wasps, and probably most famously our yellow jackets, which live in the ground. Now here, this was one of two photos that came in with the label to ask. And it's a snake that I kind of snapped to when I saw it, because I thought, oh my goodness, is that a black rat snake? This was taken at Campton Forest Preserve. Black rat snakes do live in Illinois, but they're not found in Kane County. Black rat snakes, if you've ever traveled a little bit downstate, you might have encountered one. They can get quite large, 6 feet or more. We actually have one at Hickory Knolls at our nature center. His name is Randy Rat Snake, and he's good size. He's probably at least 6 feet long, right, Rachel? Well, so this snake, it's got an issue here. Something is not right with the eye. I don't know if it's an injury or if this was maybe a bad shed. There's something a little funky going on here. But if we look at the scales on this snake, we see that there are what we call keels. There's a little raised ridge, a very, actually a pretty strongly raised ridge or keel in the center of each one of these scales. We see it there, and then there's another photo here, close up, and we can see again right here. See that line on that scale? The line there. Each scale has a keel. Now around here, the two most likely groups of snakes to have keels on them, or that have keels on them, are the garter snakes and the water snakes. This was at Campton Forest Preserve in the grass. So we're going to eliminate the water snakes. There's not really a water body there that would foster their growth. Plus where the eyes are on this snake is not where we would expect to see them on a water snake. So this is a garter. Now, garter snakes most typically have stripes. This is a plains garter snake. This is what we call an eastern garter snake, but we call it the Chicago subspecies. Its stripes were a little bit harder to see, but it was also not great lighting there. These snakes, the plains and the eastern garter, Chicago garter, were both found at our Otter Creek Bend Wetland Park. If we go back though to this snake, those markings are absent. This, I'm pretty positive, this is a garter snake that has an overabundance of melanin, and it's caused you can't see the stripes on its back. We see this every once in a while. Not so. And just to, since we're looking at pictures here, we may as well do a full-on ID thing. So we call this a plains garter snake because of the position of this lateral stripe. If we zoom in here, we see it's kind of raised up a few scale rows above the belly scales. When you look at a snake's scales, you can see they're in rows that go diagonal. You can go from one to the next, and they go diagonally, kind of pointing backwards. When we count the scale rows here, 1, 2, 3, that's important. That scale row is higher up. That's what makes that a plains garter snake. I know, potato, right? But it's kind of a big deal if you're doing a snake census. On these snakes, the common garter snake, and this Chicago subspecies just means it has these extra fancy bars going across the stripe here on the side. This lateral stripe is closer to the belly. A little blurry here, but it's on scale rows 2 and 3 as opposed to scale rows 3 and 4. I know y'all are going to run out tomorrow morning to see if you can count these, right? A couple other things about garter snakes. They and we see this in the actually several snakes will do this. When they feel threatened, when they're not sure what's going to happen next, they want to look tough, they want to look big, they flatten themselves out. This was a picture, I can't remember if I took this or if somebody sent it to me, but I had it labeled angry garter because it has flared its body, it's flattened itself out so that it looks to whatever the potential threat may be, it looks bigger than it really is. It's spread itself out. Pretty successful strategy. I know there's a lot of people that won't touch a snake that's looking like it's angry. Diane, you sent us this photo. I don't know if this was just last year, but when you look at these snakes, sometimes they're quite obvious, even though they've got these fairly bold markings of yellow down their backs. But sometimes, a lot of times, that coloration really works for them. Can you see the snake in this picture? I've been kind of swirling around it here. If we move in there, you can start to see it. Here's a garter slithering along the ground very well. Sometimes it's the movement that gives them away. Garter snakes, in fact, that stripe that goes down their back, back to this one here, it can lend to the illusion that the snake is really flying along. That longitudinal stripe adds to the impression that the snake is moving quite quickly. So sometimes a predator will think, phooey, I'll just go find something that's not as fast as that speedy little snake, even though they're not really moving any faster than any of the other snakes we have. Another thing about garters is this pigmentation thing. This is not the same snake that we saw before. This is a different melanistic garter snake. This one actually was found behind our nature center, Hickory Knolls, which, if I had to guess, I would say that Hickory Knolls, actually Hickory Knolls back in the day used to be called Campton Hills Park. So Campton Hills Park and Campton Forest Preserve, if you're in this area, you might be able to picture them. They're only, I don't know, 2-3 miles apart. So it could be that this melanistic, this gene for this extra dark pigment is just here in the population. For years, we had a melanistic garter snake that lived in the garage behind the nature center. And she was big. She was close to 4 feet. With garters, the female tends to be larger than the male, larger, longer, heavier bodied. Well, she would hang out in the garage. I terrified people, members of our staff that were big fans of snakes. Well, one day, I remember it was early in 2012. We were hosting a workshop for local outdoor educators, and it was so warm. That was one of our worst droughts in recent memory. 2012 got warm very early in the year. We were outside in shirt sleeves, and it was February. Well, when things warm up, snakes, which spend the winter in a what we now call brumation. It's kind of like hibernation, but it's for snakes. Snakes will take advantage of warmer weather like that to come out and warm up and maybe find something to eat. Well, this giant melanistic garter that lived in the garage chose that day to come out and warm up. And that was also the day that a hawk chose to go hunting by the garage. And my last and lasting image of what we called Miss Garter is her being carted off, writhing in the talons of that red-tailed hawk. So melanism, it happens from time to time. Does it help the snake or hurt the snake? I think it just kind of is. It's neither good nor bad. However, it's not the only color variation we see in garter snakes. This is another photo, not terribly recent. This was from a few years ago. Our restoration crew took this photo of garter snakes in springtime. I suspect this is the start of a mating ball. When they come out of brumation, they are hungry, and they also want to find a boyfriend or girlfriend. When you first look at this photo, there's 2 snakes that are very obvious. There's one that goes off to the left, and there's another that goes off to the right. But then we've got this other one that has lighter pigmentation. Right here. So it's not really an albino, but it is an absence of a lot of those dark pigments. I don't know if we would call this amelanistic. I'm not real up on some of my snake terms the way I should be, but it was it's yet another example of how something so very common can have some pretty unusual twists and turns to it. These, by the way, these are all common or eastern garter snakes as well. With that, you can see the black bars here going across that. So these might even be a cross between a regular eastern garter and then a Chicago garter snake, because those bars are not nearly as heavy as they were on the snake that we saw previously. You can see bars here as well. In the non-Chicago subspecies, there's no black bar. It's just a plain yellow stripe going along the side. This lighter colored snake, I don't see any bars there either. So that would maybe be the amelanistic version of regular eastern garter or Thamnophis tertalis. And what else do we have? We got all kinds of things to get caught up on here. Notice this happening, and fair warning, come this Thursday, the featured creature in the Good Natured newspaper column is earwigs. one of the bugs everybody loves to hate. But I noticed them hanging out. I got about, not a lot, about a half a dozen milkweeds in front of my house. And I was seeing glimpses of what looked like quite the earwig party going on the top. So this is a weird angle, but I had bent the the stem of the milkweed down to get a little bit better lighting. And then here I finally decided I should just use the flash. But look at this. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. A few actually had dropped down to the ground before I took this photo. So there had to be at least a half a dozen in that tiny little space where the milkweed leaves are folded together at the top of the plant. We can see that there's a male here. Male earwigs have these large curved pinchers. The female is curved, but to a lesser extent, and the pinchers are also shorter. Yes, they do pinch, although I was holding one and I didn't get pinched. And this, by the way, these are at the back of the earwig. The front of the earwig has a head and antennae. These are tails or cerci, the pinchers at the back. What I was trying to do is I was holding one. I had read that one of the defenses of these earwigs is the release of an obnoxious odor. And I couldn't smell it. Either they weren't letting it go or I was unable to smell it. These two, I should mention, are European earwigs, which is about the only kind we have around here. These European earwigs were introduced to the United States in 1907 in Seattle. They also showed up on the East Coast in, I don't know, 1912 or so. What I bring out in the article is that as a kid, I do not remember seeing a lot of these. When I was a sophomore in high school, our biology teacher had us make insect collections. There was only one kid in all the, I don't know, say 250 kids that were enrolled in biology class that semester. Only one kid found, Tom Bergman was his name, he found an earwig and he got extra credit for that because that was an order that was not represented by any of the other insects. Earwigs belong to the order Dermaptera, which means leathery skin. They do have wings. They're not likely to fly, but they do have wings that are underneath these wing pads here. The wing, when it comes out, is supposed to be shaped like an ear. That, according to the literature, is why they are called earwigs. It's not because they crawl in your ear, but they can. They don't often, but I've had enough people tell me that either it happened to them or someone they know that it's possible. Thing is, you have to be putting your ears near where there's earwig habitat, which is generally dark, damp, quiet crevices. So those two things have to come, those three things have to come together. But we're having a big earwig year. We've had moisture, we've had a lot of clouds. We had a mild winter, which favored their survival. One last little earwig thing I'll throw out before we move on, because I know you're loving these guys. Earwigs are great parents. Well, the moms are. The dads they don't make it into winter. They usually die in the fall, but the moms will burrow into the ground. They'll create a chamber where they lay their eggs, and then they groom their eggs. They caress their eggs. They turn their eggs. They keep them free of fungi and other things that might be detrimental to their developing larvae. When the eggs hatch, I should say nymph, not larva. When the baby earwigs come out, the mom feeds them. So it's one of the few examples we have of insect maternal care. Doesn't that make you love them? Oh, and I lied. One more thing. I think the reason, so of those 6 milkweed plants in my front yard, this was the only one where these earwigs were clumped together. And at first I thought, well, what is it about this milkweed that is so attractive to them? Doing a little bit of research, there's some mighty fine earwig papers out there in the ends of the internet. But there's one that in describing their life cycle, talks about what's called an aggregation pheromone. It's a chemical that causes the earwigs to come together, and it's contained in their frass, which is also known as poop. So I guess an earwig climbed into this milkweed, relieved itself, and then got a whole bunch of friends to come and join the party. Isn't that cool? Even though they're earwigs. Yeah, I know. Let's move on. Jim, Diane, thanks much for this. In general, the lepidopterans are butterflies in particular. A lot of people have commented they're just not seeing them in the numbers they're accustomed. Is it a weather thing? Is it a short-lived phenomenon? Is it a sign of a bigger problem? I don't know the answers to any of that, but these caterpillars are thriving on what appears to be dill. These are black swallowtail caterpillars, and you can look for these on any member of the parsley family, the Apiaceae plants. So parsley, cilantro, dill, Queen Anne's lace. As much as we try to remove that from our natural areas, because it's not native, it is a food plant for these wonderful caterpillars, which will soon be shedding their skin one more time to form a chrysalis. A swallowtail chrysalis has two little, they call it a saddle, but it's really two little threads that attach the chrysalis to an object. Takes a couple of weeks for the butterfly to form. They'll come out. They will lay eggs. We'll get one more generation in, and then I believe those caterpillars will overwinter in their chrysalis stage. So cool picture. Thank you so much for sharing that. This, I don't know if we have any fans of 80s music. I cannot. Oh, wait, I think it's coming to me. I was thinking this was from an album cover because I was going to do a screen share, or I'm sorry, an image share of an album cover from the 80s. I kept thinking there's a Pretenders album, but I think it's a Pretenders video that this reminded me of. What it is, it's two flies, a male and a female, engaged in what flies and, actually all insects do at some point. But it was on my windshield. I was out at Rustic Road Farm the other day, and I looked at that and I immediately thought Pretenders. I've been trying to think of since then what it was that I could share with you. But was it the Chain Gang video? I watched a lot of MTV back in the 80s. We don't need to belabor this anymore, but it was just kind of a fun little shot that I thought you might enjoy too. And I found this. So I've been over to Davis School twice. Davis School is my go-to playground, wood chip covered playground to look for these beetles here. These are stag beetles. This is a male. Well, they're called reddish brown stag beetles, if you want to be official about it, Lucanus capreolus. But it actually, it's one of two species we have in this area. The other one is called Lucanus placida, and it's a smaller, it's a smaller version with a darker exoskeleton. These guys, so the males have these large mandibles here. They've got the antennae that they use to sense each other, and females. They've also got this up here, just like on our legs, we have that large bone in our thigh called the femur. Well, the femur here on the stag beetle is a different color. It's kind of an orange color. So that's a quick way to tell that. If you don't have the two different species to compare size to, you can look for that trait. The males use these mandibles to wrestle with each other, and then they will mate with a female, and the female deposits her eggs in rotting wood, which makes playgrounds covered with wood chips great places to look. I might try heading over there again this evening. This particular individual was not here in the neighborhood. This was out at Hickory Knolls, behind the building. the larvae that result from the eggs from these stag beetles will feed on the decomposing wood. They have special flora, or is it fauna? I think it's flora, digestive bacteria in their digestive tract that can allow them to digest the components of wood that a lot of other creatures can't. Helps decompose the wood and break it down. That's why they're real important members of our decomposer community in the area. We're going to have a lot of wood decomposing after these storms. A lot of trees are getting chipped. We might end up seeing a big stag beetle season again in a year or two. Can't remember exactly how long it takes for those larvae to develop, but they get big. They're almost as big as my thumb. If you find those big white grubs, you might be looking at stag beetle larvae into wood that is breaking down. John and Bobby, you sent me these pictures. This is indeed, you'd wondered if this was a grass spider, and yes, it is. This is a web. They produce these sheet webs that get thicker over time. I noticed this behavior. Some of you longtime viewers might remember I used to have dining room spider. That was a grass spider that I rescued from in between the screen and the window in my dining room. And I was kind of disappointed in her web making skills until I realized that those thick sheets of web with the funnel at one end, which is a characteristic of the spider, it forms over time. So they will continually lay down silk over time and create these bigger webs. And then this one, because of the weather pattern that we're in, it's got all this wonderful dew wrapped, being held on it. Here you can see the spider in the funnel that is at one end of that web. Peekaboo. There she is. Is that she, or is that actually that? Let's go back here. You can't see here. Male spiders will have enlarged pedipalps. And that kind of looks like a male grass spider there. So spiders have 8 legs, and then they've got these 2 other things that look like legs that are up near the mouth. And that from this angle, these certainly look like male pedipalps. They look like boxing gloves. But grass spiders, as we go through the summer, the spider gets bigger and their webs get bigger too. So keep your eyes open. You see them on grass, but you also see them on shrubs. They like yews, Y-E-W, which I believe is what we're looking at here. They're a common spider, but they're a fun spider to have around too. They do a good job of controlling some of the bugs we have too many of. This is a flower I learned is tall bellflower. It is in all its glory now. We focus a lot in woodlands on the flowers that are blooming in the springtime, the woodland wildflowers that come out before the trees leaf out. But there's a fair number of flowers in the woods that bloom after the leaves come out when it's relatively shady. Again, I learned this as tall bellflower. Apparently now the proper name is American bellflower. They've also changed it from campanula to campanulastrum. There goes my Latin, Americanum. It's had a little bit of nomenclature change, but it doesn't take away from just how cool these flowers are. They're favored by long-tongued bees, and they will produce seeds every year. So these are not, they're perennial in the sense they come back every year, but it's because that those flowers go to seed and they give us more bellflowers year to year. It's like it's a big year for earwigs. It's a huge year for rabbits. I can't remember if I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago. I was trying to take a picture of one rabbit in a yard. When I looked at the photo later, I realized there was actually 3 bunnies in that yard. They were having a little convention there. And this is a young, I would say, almost grown rabbit. Don't know if it's a male or a female. It's a cottontail rabbit, which is the eastern cottontail is the type of wild rabbit that we have in this area, and they are just everywhere. There was not too long ago, people were asking me what happened to all the rabbits. I never see rabbits anymore. But this is an animal, they're extremely popular with predators. They get eaten by owls for sure, great horned owls. This is one of their preferred prey items, and we have a lot of great horns around here. But they're also caught by foxes and by coyotes and by domestic dogs. And despite all of those predators, they are on an upswing. Their numbers seem, at least locally here, to be very, very high. We'll see how long that lasts. There's a few diseases out there that affect rabbits, and then usually when the rabbit population gets to be pretty high, then the predator population follows suit. And with a lot of predators around feeding on the rabbits, then the numbers get driven back down again. So we'll see how long our rabbit boom lasts. But for now, they're seeing them everywhere. Maybe you are too. Just briefly, this I came across this. I can't remember. You guys have been tuning in for a while. I have a fondness for older reports. This actually dates back to 1952. Few weeks ago, we talked about Baltimore Orioles. This is an Oriole nest. And I rant from time to time on how the Orioles around here, a lot of times they're beating the odds when they successfully raise young, despite having built a nest out of fishing line. We have so much fishing line, bizarre things too, ribbon, dental. These birds are driven to weave nests from strong fibers, and in a natural area, that's what they're going to find. They're going to find fibers from dog bane. They might strip from basswood. There's different plants that make good fibers. In fact, Jerry, you had pictures of a Baltimore Oriole female who was with natural materials. Well, so we talked about how dangerous man-made materials are. I thought this was interesting. When by me rattling on like this, you probably had a chance to read the whole thing. This is a documentation from 1952 of a cowbird who got tangled up in the strands of horsehair that were used to weave this particular Baltimore Oriole nest. I thought that was kind of interesting because it triggered a very, very distant memory of a book I'd written book I had read as a kid, where it talked about a bird that was found dangling, a deceased bird that was found dangling from horsehair from a nest that was inside of a barn. And I've always thought that horsehair, horses used to be a lot more common than they are today. That horsehair, has now, as a danger, has been replaced by fishing line. But 1952 wasn't all that long ago. This bird perished. Now, it wasn't an oriole that died from the horsehair. This was a cowbird. Now, was that cowbird looking to place an egg of its own? Cowbirds are brood parasites. They don't raise their own young. They let another bird take care of that for them. The female just deposits her egg and then she leaves. So I don't know if she was getting ready to make a deposit when she got caught. I don't know, but it just caught me as something kind of interesting, that even natural fibers can be hazardous when they are applied like this. Yeah, maybe it saved the nest from getting a brood parasite in it. Well, saw this, had to add an S. It bugs me. I see so many clever memes out there And this one, they left the S off of degrees, so I tried to fix it as best I could. She believed she could, but it was 91 degrees and humid outside, so she didn't. Kind of sums up the last week, doesn't it, folks? Let's stop the share here. I think we had a couple of chats to get to, a few chats here. Yes, Janice, we should organize a scavenger hunt. We had well, Bonnie came out last fall. Bonnie is a landscape designer. She has extensive experience in identifying plants, and we did look for a good period. We looked until we found, actually, we found a polyphemus moth caterpillar that day. That was last September. I don't know where this plant is. It's got to be out here somewhere. And now that I have this, I'm going to try to grow a new one. Grow a new one. That sounds funny. Anyway, we'll see what we can get going with that nut. Yeah, Meredith, Swiss chard, lettuce, a lot of our ornamentals. People who were preparing for the Batavia Plain Dirt Gardeners Garden Walk, which was this past weekend. One woman had, I think it was that one, unless it was the Master Gardeners Walk. She lost 100 zinnia plants to earwigs. So they do munch on tender, soft leaves. They also eat aphids. They eat scale insects. I always try to stick up, you know, nothing in nature is all bad or all good, but they do balance that appetite for plants with an appetite for plant pests as well, even though they can sometimes be called pests themselves. Yeah, I hope that helps you feel a little better, Laura, about earwigs. I know they're not everybody's favorite, and I fully expect to get the mail. You know, sometimes I'll write about things that aren't very popular, like mice. There's mouse lovers out there, but there's a lot of mouse haters as well. So we'll see. We might have some fun mailbag stuff next week, or people might just choose not to read. We'll have to see. And yes, Jim and Diane, thank you. That was still that swallowtails were on. Yay, Susie had a monarch. That's great. I've seen one, and it was back in May. I was so hopeful back then because it was early on in the season. I thought it was going to be a big year for monarchs, but I've still only just seen that one. So let's hope that maybe there's weather, there's things that have prevented them from, and them and other species as well, from, you know, realizing their full potential, and they will be yet to come. Lots of butterflies at the Idea Garden. Always a wonderful resource. Thanks for mentioning that, Meredith. The Idea Garden, Peck Road and Route 38, maintained by the University of Illinois Extension Master Gardeners. Great stuff out there. Great diversity of plants and great diversity of ideas for what to do with the plants in your yard. You got foxes under your deck. Congratulations. Jim and Diane, well, I tell you, I've got a few bunnies here. I don't know, just as, you know, nothing in nature is all good or all bad. Nothing in nature is all smart or all dumb, but you may have heard the term dumb bunny. Pains me to say it, but so I've got, you know, the furry roommates here. I've got Boker, who has a prey drive that is overdrive all the time. Bunnies, certainly bunnies have the ability, the rabbits have the ability to sense predators, to smell predators. I'm certain this yard smells like the furry roommates, and yet they still come in here to eat the clover. So I've actually taken to bringing tech support puppy, also known as Boker. I take him in the backyard on a leash now, just so that he won't end up bagging a rabbit, but maybe it could convince them to go visit you guys so you can have some rabbits in your yard. Folks, I think we are, hold on, jump to the latest. No, I think that is the latest. It's certainly late. We're a little overtime tonight, folks, but I appreciate you sticking in till the bitter end. We've had a good week of nature, wild week of weather. We'll see what next week brings. We'll be back again next week, July 23rd, for more good nature. Have a good one, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Pam.
Good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Gotcha. Huh?